In a tequila-induced rage, a young TikToker is accused of threatening to kill her husband, the father of her child, by chasing him around the house with a knife, and apparently, she thinks she's untouchable. And in a jaw-dropping twist, the husband tells the judge the woman accused of trying to kill him is actually the real victim. I go through this crazy case. I'm Angenette Levy, and this is Crime Fix. There is a reason that Morgan & Morgan is the country's largest personal injury law firm. It's because they win a lot. The firm has more than 1,000 lawyers who have recovered $25 billion for more than 500,000 clients. In the last few months, a client in Florida got $12 million when insurance offered them just $350,000. In Pennsylvania, another client was awarded $26 million. That was 40 times the insurer's offer. Morgan & Morgan makes it really easy to fight for what you deserve. You can even start a claim from your phone. So if you are ever injured, you can start a claim at forthepeople.com/crimefix. Click the link below or scan the QR code that you see right there on your screen. I have to tell you, this case is really sad. 22-year-old Elizabeth Deore is facing serious felony charges. She's accused of chasing her husband with a knife, not once, but twice. But despite the allegations sheriff's deputies are making against her, her husband actually wrote a letter to the judge claiming that she did nothing wrong and that she's an amazing mother and an even better wife. That's what he called her. This case takes us to Campbell County, Wyoming. It's right on the Montana state line, and it involves a domestic dispute. It's very serious, and we know how complicated these can be, so let's jump right in. It involves a young couple, and they share a 4-year-old daughter. They've been married for 4 years. Elizabeth Deore is the wife and mother. It's unclear what the couple does for a living, but we know that Elizabeth is active on TikTok, and she is not afraid to get personal. Some of what she posts indicates her relationship with her husband might not be a very healthy one. And Elizabeth likes to play games. Now, the couple recently moved from Alvin, Texas to Wright, Wyoming, a small town about 200 miles north of Cheyenne, and they have been settling down into their new home. Maybe they were looking for a fresh start. You know, it's really hard to know what goes on behind closed doors with a couple. On October 15th, the night began, apparently with some good company and tequila, and deputies say it ended with an explosive argument that led to a call involving 911. Just before 11:30 p.m., a 24-year-old man called 911 to report a domestic dispute between his neighbors. The caller provided dispatch with a play-by-play of what he could observe. The dispatch notes state, at 23:39 hours, lady went toward husband with knife. At 23:42 hours, still fighting, still has the knife. Again, at 23:42 hours, still has the knife. He is against the wall. At 23:47 hours, heard her yell, "You'll be effing dead." At 23:49 hours, he is trying to leave, but she isn't letting him. At 23:53 hours, she is actively hitting him, doesn't see blade, no blood. At 23:58 hours, she has him by the hair again, in chair closest to window. Now, the caller said the fighting began with Elizabeth grabbing her husband by the head and hitting him 4 times with her free hand. After that, she picked up a filet knife, gripping it like an ice pick with the blade pointing down. When she starts to chase him around, that's when the neighbor calls 911. The call was made at 11:39 p.m., and at this point, the husband was pinned against the wall, and the wife was still armed. 8 minutes later, the wife screamed, "You'll be effing dead." Wow, this sounds absolutely terrifying. The caller told the 911 dispatcher that the husband ran away as Elizabeth tried to slash him, so he locked himself in the bathroom. That's when she said, "I'm going to kill you, mother effer," and began to stab the door until the knife bent. Deputies say Elizabeth Deore went back to the kitchen and pulled a butcher knife from the knife block. Her husband thought he might be able to make a break for it. And when he did, according to the documents, Elizabeth met him with another knife. Deputies said she was holding the knife in her left hand while hitting her husband in the face with her right hand. At this point, the neighbors helped remove the couple's 4-year-old daughter from the house to make sure she was safe. Now, the couple, according to the documents, wrestled a little while longer until Elizabeth fell to the floor and she was starting to overheat. So her husband carried her to the bathroom to cool her off in the shower before taking her to bed. When Campbell County deputies arrived, the husband was sitting in the living room and the knife was on the floor. Elizabeth was laying on the bed, crying, and deputies did not see any injuries on her, but noticed that she appeared to be pretty drunk. Elizabeth was taken to the emergency room where doctors say she likely suffered an epileptic seizure because of her body temperature. Investigators later found out the same medical event happened to Elizabeth in the past. A blood alcohol test was administered at 5:35 a.m., and her BAC, according to the documents, was 0.55. When deputies spoke to her at the hospital, she said she got into an argument with her husband and then ended up in the shower. Back at the scene, the husband gave consent for deputies to search their home, and the deputies took items of evidence, including a bent filet knife in the sink, a butcher's knife in the entryway, and a mostly empty bottle of Patron, that's the tequila. They also took note that the stab marks on the bathroom door were approximately head high. Now, the husband didn't have any injuries and did not request any medical attention, according to the records, but deputies felt they had enough probable cause to arrest and charge Elizabeth with aggravated assault after she was released from the hospital. So, from the outside, things escalated pretty quickly from 0 to 100, but the more details the neighbors provided to law enforcement, the more this story starts to make sense. The neighbors tell deputies the young couple had just moved to the ranch a few weeks earlier and had quickly become friendly with them, so much so they were all hanging out and drinking when the incident occurred. They were aware that Elizabeth recently found out her husband was talking to another woman in town, so after some tequila, Elizabeth developed so-called rage. An argument started, and the neighbors tried to help by splitting them up. The husband left the home with the male neighbor, and Elizabeth stayed back with the female. But Elizabeth was still upset, so she begins to cut her husband's ID cards and throw his clothes into a pile before pouring bleach on them. When the two men returned home and the husband saw what she was doing, he got angry. And we know what happened from there, according to the documents. A judge found probable cause to charge Elizabeth with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, possession of a deadly weapon with unlawful intent, 2 counts of domestic assault, and 2 counts of reckless endangerment. So the case was bound over. This is where the letter to the judge comes in from the husband. The husband wrote to the judge claiming the deputy's report was wrong and that Elizabeth was being wrongfully accused. She is an amazing mother and a better wife. She might has a short fuse, but she has never done anything like this before. But Elizabeth has made comments that indicate she's capable of this type of behavior on social media. She posted last year, "I don't know why nobody wants to drink with me. Also me when I'm drinking." But it doesn't stop there. She asks on Facebook, "Ladies, how do you get your man to act right?" And there's a picture of a frying pan. Now, the husband also writes in that letter that it was really his fault and that he pushed her to the breaking point because, quote, "she's done nothing wrong but bring this family up." He even goes as far to say that she never threatened him and that the so-called witnesses weren't even in the house when the incident took place. So, to really analyze this case, I thought we should bring in an expert. He is Dr. Daniel Bober. He's a forensic psychiatrist, and he analyzes all types of people and all types of things. So, Dr. Bober, your first thoughts on this? I mean, we have Elizabeth Deore running around the house, allegedly. This is what she's accused of doing with a knife, threatening her husband. There are witnesses to this, and she's facing serious charges.
Well, it's something very common that we hear about all the time. And what you have here is really the perfect storm. The discovery or the belief of an infidelity, which heightens anger, as seen as a threat to attachment in the relationship, in the context of predisposing factors, right? Which again are very common. The sensitivity to alcohol, the use of alcohol, someone who has low distress or low frustration tolerance, and there's this issue about overheating that I was reading about. Does she have some sort of endocrine problem? that was unaddressed, or is it just an excuse? We just don't know. So she has poor emotional regulation. And there's this cycle in relationships, this cycle of coercion and reconciliation that we see very common in relationships where there's intimate partner violence. And there's these control and punishment themes, right? Dominance and coercive control, cutting up his ID, pouring bleach on his clothes, all these things, blocking his escape. So these are very common themes in these types of relationships. And why do people stay? Right? We hear this all the time. Why doesn't he just leave, or why doesn't she just leave? And then again, we get into things like trauma bonding and appeasement, not wanting to sort of disturb this equilibrium. And even though the equilibrium is very sick and very dysfunctional, people don't want to leave it, and they stay in it. And in this particular situation, I would predict a very high risk of death in the future because of the fact that there was this threat: I'm going to kill you. I'll leave out the expletive, and the use of a weapon. So, this is the sort of situation where 3 months from now, if we were in this talking about this particular crime, I would say, hey, no surprise here. How could we not see this coming? There were so many things leading up to it. It reminds me sort of the O.J. Simpson case, where a lot of people said, OJ was convicted of the civil crime, but he was acquitted of the criminal offense. But we see all these things leading up to it, right? Previous calls to the police of domestic violence. So there's a lot to unpack here, but there's some very common themes.
Yeah, there there certainly is a lot to unpack here. And what's so crazy to me is that there are witnesses to this. I mean, people living there on the ranch were like, "Oh my God, what in the heck is going on?" They do the right thing and they call 911. And we've got all of these allegations in here, of her running around with a knife. You talked about the poor emotional regulation. Then you add tequila to the mix. Alcohol. When you add alcohol into any situation, it's usually not a positive thing. People who like to drink will be like, "Oh, you're being a prude." Alcohol can really make everything much worse. Am I
Yeah.
wrong, Dr. Bober?
As a psychiatrist, I can tell you that alcohol never helped anyone or helped a relationship. There are a few things that I speak about in absolutes, but alcohol is just not a good thing. I mean, people like to drink alcohol, but it's a toxin. It's very bad for you. There's really no safe amount. A lot of the studies on the heart benefits are sort of overstated and flawed. And in relationships, it's really like pouring fuel on the fire. So it's not a good thing.
Yeah, I always love when you see these studies on the news like, "Oh yeah, wine is good for you." Well, who paid for the study first of all? And
The company that makes it, right.
right, and look at what it is in the wine that's actually good for you. It's not the alcohol.
Exactly.
So let's clear that up right away. So,
Right.
moving on, all of the things you talked about, the pouring the bleach on the stuff, the destroying of the items, those are all very much like anger and control things that she is accused of doing. And that to me is some scary stuff. It almost like it's just like crazy to me. Even take the alcohol out of the mix. I mean, what she has been accused of doing is very, very scary. And then you have a child who's kind of witnessing this and seeing all of this. So there's a lot that is really unhealthy in this household.
We know there's a lot of stressors here that were sort of brewing in the background. We know geographically they had just moved to potentially an isolated location. A lack of supports was their financial stress. We have the child in the home and the stress of childcare. So there's a lot of things going on here. But really, this is the perfect storm when you look at her predisposition to not managing her anger, to the emotional dysregulation, that you pour in the alcohol, so to speak, and you've got all these stressors in the background, and then sort of lighting the fuse, which is the accusation or the belief of infidelity.
What is really scary too is the fact that she's stabbing this knife into the door, allegedly. This is what the allegation is, until it bends the knife. I can't even imagine the force it takes to bend a knife. It could be a cheap knife, but still, that takes a lot of force.
Oh, absolutely. So that just gives you an idea of the level of rage that we're talking about here. These people need serious therapy. I don't even know that a child should be in the home on a regular basis until these issues can be resolved. There needs to be obviously a no alcohol rule in the home, because it's really leading to very bad things, and it's going to have a very awful conclusion in the future if it keeps going this way.
Let's move now to the letter he writes to the judge. And he says, she this is all, everybody's got it all wrong. You know, the cops have it wrong. The witnesses who called 911, they've got it wrong. I'm going to read a little bit of this letter right here. This letter is because my wife, Elizabeth Deore, is wrongly convicted. What the report states is wrong. She is an amazing mother and a better wife. She might have a short fuse, but she has never done anything like this before. This goes, yeah, you may have a short fuse, but the allegations in this police report, in this affidavit, go far beyond just having a short fuse.
And also very common in relationships with domestic violence or intimate partner violence, where when the violence is discovered by a third party, the victim makes excuses. Oh, I was the one that pushed her to do it. I shouldn't have been late. I shouldn't have left my pants on the floor. If I had just had dinner ready on time, this wouldn't have happened. This is very common, but again, it talks about, again, it speaks to trauma bonding, appeasement, betrayal, attachment, not wanting to disturb the delicate equilibrium, again, however sick or dysfunctional it is in the relationship. And so the victim makes excuses to try to mitigate the damage from the violence in terms of legal consequences and things like that, because they just don't want to leave the person because they are bonded to them in a very sick and perverse way.
I want to read a little bit more of this letter because I was astounded when I read this. I pushed Elizabeth Deore to the point of breaking. She told me to get out, and I did not. She did not threaten me with a knife. She took one knife out and did not attack me with it. The so-called witness did not see what happened, for they were outside. All they heard was telling Elizabeth Deore is innocent to the charges that is brought up against her. That woman has done nothing but bring this family up. Uh, you know, I'm still just really astounded at reading this letter. It's very sad to me. So I'm thinking the prosecutor and the judge, they see this letter and they're going to be like, okay,
It's an alternate reality.
yeah, this is classic domestic violence. So to
Textbook.
me, also, a lot of people might still in 2025 have a hard time looking at a man as a victim of domestic violence, but it's been happening forever.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's again, that's a very common stereotype that the man is the aggressor, the woman is always the victim. Listen, it happens both ways. The woman can be the aggressor. It happens in straight couples, it happens in gay couples, it happens all the time. Alcohol is often associated with it. And it's something that in society we need to start dealing with, that this is going on right next door with your neighbors, and you need to have your eyes open to it.
Yeah, I really think, I hope people look at this case. And obviously, Elizabeth Deore is innocent until proven guilty, but still, I really hope people look at this case and they're like, wow. And I hope a man watching this, especially, can see this and be like, you know what? I can be a victim even if I'm a man, because
Exactly.
it goes on. Dr. Daniel Bober, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
My pleasure as always.
So, Elizabeth Deore, she was booked into the Campbell County Detention Center and her bail was set at $50,000. At the time of this recording, she is no longer in custody, so it's unclear when she will be back in court. And that is it for this episode of Crime Fix. I'm Angenette Levy. Thanks so much for being with me. I'll see you back here next time.